Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. Today we have Raymond Tatten, and he has been on the show before. He is the author, this time, of 3 great books. We have Text Mostly, and Sawyers Regret, and I did have, I don't know what happened. Oh, here it is. It was stuck on the other one. Moving Willie. Welcome back, Ray.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to coming back. This is great.
Yeah, he's, you grew up, if I'm getting this right, I think you grew up on your father's farm in Harvard?
That's right.
What was that like?
Well, that's what one of those books, that's what Moving Willie is all about.
Yeah.
That's my experiences. We moved, there was a family event going on. We moved around a little bit. So we finally wound up back on my father's farm. I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And so I went from living in the city of Lowell, which you probably imagine back in the 50s how rough that was, back to an isolation of a farm. So all it was animals and my brother. That was it. There was nobody around, no neighbors.
Yeah.
And it was before 495, and it was just so remote. I mean, I make the joke you could almost not find it even if you knew where it was. It was on an old dirt road in Harvard. And 495, when they built it, it went right through the middle of it. But at the time, it was just, I call it a ponderosa, because our neighbor had a farm that I write in the book. We didn't know where it ended. We'd ride our ponies there all day, looking, following trails, and it was just, looking back on it now, it was such a special experience that...
That was 1957, you lived on the farm, right?
Yes.
And you'd lived in the city first.
We lived in Lowell for a few years.
That had to be quite a culture shock.
That was quite a culture shock, both ways, going from Maynard, which was a lot like Upton at the time, going into Lowell, but all immersed in that environment, and then leaving that to the farm. So I started writing, when I first started writing, I started writing little snippets of my experience, and the next thing I know, I had a manuscript, and that's what Moving Willie is.
You did a great job. My gosh, this is, I would say, well, it's probably the bigger of the 3, right?
I think it is, a little bit, yeah.
Did that come before the other 2? Text and...
That came along with the others, because that was the one I had worked on, and I tried to get a publisher for it, and I had no success, so I started sending pieces of it out, and I started getting them published. And then along the way, I got the bug to do Sawyers Regret, and so I finally got Moving Willie published, and then I focused on Sawyers Regret, which is the last book that you're holding.
Yeah, this is different from the other 2. These are more young. Right. This is about a 16-year-old in Lancaster, kidnapped by Native American raiders. Tell us about this one. This is interesting, too.
Well, what happened there, people always ask me, why did you write that book?
It's cool.
And when I was in high school, before I went to college that summer, I had a job at Fruitlands Museum. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's in Harvard.
Yeah.
And part of the museum, there's an Indian museum. So I used to duck in there to cool off in the summer on the hot days. And the lady there was a historian. She started telling me about King Philip, the war and all that. And I was like astounded. I had no idea that you call them Indians then, lived here to the extent that they did. And I was fascinated. So as I got older, I got in the habit of stopping at the plaques in Lancaster in particular and reading the little snippets. And I drove by this, it's a plaque, it looks like a tomb, looks like a marker from a graveyard. It's tilted in a little meadow. It's about a 3x3 thing. And after driving by it 1,000 times, I finally stopped to read it, see what it said.
Yeah.
And it said, on this spot in 1705, Thomas Sawyer, his son Elias, and John Bigelow from Marlborough were captured by Indians and taken to Canada, blah, 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 blah. And I was looking around, and I was just trying to imagine being captured by Indians and what had happened. How did they do it? Maybe they snuck up on them at dawn. So, and the other thing I wondered was, how old was the son? Didn't say.
Yeah.
So the story that I knew, there's a story that's pretty well known that the son fell in love with an Indian maiden. So maybe that's made up, but I don't think it's made up.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, well, he must have been old enough to be in a relationship. But if he was like 19 or 20, he was probably married already. So I bet he's around 16. I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I was thinking, I was taking writing courses, and I was fumbling with writing and fiddling with writing, and I was like, somebody ought to tell this story. I'd really like to write a story. This would be a great story.
Do you know what tribe it was, right?
I do. I know all about it now. So what happened was, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I want to write this story. And what I'll do, the thing I was thinking, Jan, was what an adventure it must have been to be. Now think of me, I grew up on a farm riding a pony.
Yeah.
So I was kind of a little Indian back then. I thought of myself as kind of an Indian kid. My brother and I used to, play all the time. And I was thinking, what an adventure that must have been for a 16-year-old boy to be captured and live with a Native American tribe. He spent 2 years in Canada. It's all documented. That must have been, I wonder what that could have been like.
It makes me think which tribe it was that would take him from Lancaster to Canada.
Well, that's the other thing. So the thing, I wondered about a lot of things, Jen. If King Philip War was over in 1676, this is 1705, it's 30 years later, why was an Indian, a Native American, walking all the way from Canada to grab these two people?
Yeah.
What was going on in the world?
Yeah.
So I was intrigued. So I started researching, and I learned a lot about why. And
What happened? But what was the why behind it?
You have to read the book to find out.
We're talking with E. Raymond Tatten, and we're talking about his book, Sawyers Regret, A Contest with Circumstances. Did you design the cover?
I did.
Awesome. I love
like
that
the cover.
tomahawk. It was Lancaster. Actually, when you went to live with your father on the farm, you weren't far from where I grew up in Wilbraham. That's near Springfield, Long Meadow.
Well, that's a long way away.
You think?
From Harvard to Wilbraham?
No, when the farm that you were on with your father, right?
Was in Harvard.
Okay, so that all right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Nowadays it'd be like.
Oh yeah,
the
it's
road.
like an hour or two or whatever. Driving
Ray,
up there.
how can they get a hold of your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. You just Google it, Sawyer's Regret or my name, and it'll come up. The other way you can get it, if you go to my website, what I've done is if you buy it at the website, I will autograph it and mail it from there. So you can do that if you want. So
Sounds good.
So-
And if somebody would like you to appear, can they reach you personally?
that's right. They can do my email. You want me to say?
Sure, tell them all about it.
Email is Raymond, that's RAMUN 55 at Comcast.net. And as I said, I'm doing a talk I think it's May 26th at the Lancaster Library, Fair Memorial Library. I'm going to talk about the book and the history behind it.
I've been to that library. It's nice.
Beautiful.
It's isn't there a town common right out in front of it?
That's right. That's right.
Ah. My son used to go to school up in Lancaster, and I remember stopping at that library before visiting or something like that. It was nice. It's big.
Where did he go? You
He
told
went
me
to the
before.
JFK, not JFK, Robert F. Kennedy.
I know what that is.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
it's
where
not
he
far
was.
from there.
I remember we went a long hike from Grafton and Upton to go visit him, but it was beautiful out there.
Yes.
You'd go up through, 70? Past
That's
Clinton?
one way to get there. Yeah, Route
past
70.
Clinton. Yeah,
62 comes in from here.
Yeah,
so
62.
70 from here, 140.
that's it. So
140.
through Shrewsbury and all, and then there's that beautiful reservoir with that very well photographed brick thing, or was it stone out in the water, the reservoir?
Yeah,
with
that's
was it
up
the
in
Miracle
West
Flag?
Boylston.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful out there. Now, here we go. This is the one, Moving Willie. Is that really supposed to be you on the cover?
Well, the interesting story there. My wife's cousin, Janet Watt is her name. She
Good
lives-
name, Janet.
Janet Watt, yeah. She is a very prolific artist, and she drew that for me.
Was it kind of from a picture of you when you were little?
No, she came up with that. I told her about the story. She came up with that. I've had a lot of comments on that cover. So it's a watercolor. It's really beautifully done.
Yeah. Very talented. I don't know if I would have picked up watercolor, though. I can't figure out what I would have... It's beautifully done, the detail.
She's really a fantastic artist. You should see some of the things she does. You should have her on your show sometime.
Yeah.
She really does wonderful
It's a
work.
story, an author's recollection set in 1957 when he went to live on his father's farm, where worlds intersect, the city and the farm, the future and the past, the boy and the adult, while 9-year-old Willie Tatten meets surprising challenges, bigger and more important than a boy might have imagined. Tell us about this one.
Well, it's interesting because my father grew up in Brighton they call it the Aberdours, the stockyards.
Yeah.
At 14 he left school. Father died. He was on his own at 14. He was
That's a city, right? Up there.
Yeah, so he grew up there, and he had this farm. He bought this farm after the war, World War II. So he was not really a farmer at all. He was a city guy.
Yeah.
That grew up around animals in the Aberdour. So he was like, I always thought of him as a cross between a city guy and a country guy. And so I have the analogy, I grew up the same way. I was from the city. I loved the city. I didn't want to leave the city. And now I'm living at a farm.
Yeah.
So I'm really a farm kid now for most of my young life, but I always longed to live in the city. I felt like I was missing something. Now looking back on it, I realized what a wonderful experience I had on the farm, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back with my friends in Lowell.
Yeah.
I felt cheated when we left, but I had my own pony. Who wouldn't want that? So.
Yeah. How did your father go from the city job? How did he become a farmer all of a sudden?
Well, he, like I said, he really did grow up at the stockyard. So he used to work for a cow trader, cattle trader. He used to drive all over Vermont when he was just able to reach the pedals. He'd tell the story. So he knew animals, and when he got out of he was a fireman in Watertown, and when he got out of the Army after World War II, he bought the farm up in Harvard, and he put pigs there. He used to drive, when he didn't work at the fire station, he'd drive up to Harvard and take care of his farm. So that's how we did.
What did your mother think of it up there?
Well, that's why we were living in Lowell, because they weren't getting along too well. But he convinced her to move to the farm.
Yeah. And what did she think? That's a big change for a woman.
Well, I have to tell you, she wasn't too thrilled with the whole experience. No. She was.
Did she last there?
She lasted somehow.
Yeah.
But she was only doing it for him. She didn't want to be there.
So, are you the oldest, Ray, or did you have a brother?
No, I was the baby. I have two older brothers. One is a year and a half older than I am. So we grew up together, the two of us. Then I have another brother who's passed away. He was like already out of the house before we came along. It was like two families almost.
So how did your brothers adjust to this? And besides you were missing your friends, how did your brothers adjust to this?
Well, in the story, I think I've done a good job of painting the two characters. My brother was like, that was more his farm than it was my father's. I always thought he was older and more confident. He ran the place.
Yeah.
He kind of called the tune, if you will. So he loved it. And so a lot of the characterizations is trying to depict his personality versus mine, and the different episodes that we had, they're all true.
Yeah.
Everything's true in the book.
Were you a paper boy?
I was.
That was, it says, in Lowell, to be somebody, a paper boy is what you needed to be. And although the jobs were hard to come by, my brother finally got his at the Sun. But you couldn't do that at the farm, did you?
No, that was before we moved to the farm.
Yeah.
So there was no paper boys at the farm. I mean,
no one around.
Our closest neighbor was like almost a mile away. There was no route to drop off papers.
You must have felt abandoned at first.
It was really different. It really was. It wasn't like I didn't know the farm. We used to go there and spend days there and stuff, but to actually live there.
Yeah.
And, but like I said, I had a lot of unique experiences that I think of.
Yeah, this book, it's called Moving Willie. How can they get a hold of this copy? Ray?
Same thing. It's on Amazon. You just Google it by the title. It comes up. So.
And there'll be hopefully a copy of these books downstairs.
I have them with me today.
And you can read those downstairs. We're talking with E. Raymond Tatten. We call him Ray, right?
Right.
And he's been on the show before. I think you thought it was maybe 3 years ago. What was the book that we were talking about then?
That was, and another thing, just saying.
Yeah.
The essays.
How'd that go?
Great. That was like a total surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that. At the time, I had lost my job, and I had all this time on my hands. I was playing golf, and I figured I had all these essays, and I had been sending them out, as I mentioned, and they were getting published. So I had some what I thought were pretty good essays. So I knew I'd never get a publisher, and I had worked at doing that, and I felt like it was impossible. So at about that time, I discovered self-publishing. I went to a course.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
With Lisa Shea. You may know her. She's from...
Oh, I know Lisa very well. In fact, this cover of Sawyers Regret reminds me of the type of cover she has.
So
that's interesting.
She was given a course, so I went one night, and I'm like, this isn't that difficult. I'm savvy with a computer. I'm going to take a shot. So I picked out 35 of my favorite essays, and I put them in the book, and it was fun to try to make a book.
Right.
It was really about that.
Yeah.
And I put them together, and next thing you know, people were buying it, and, you know, I had 7 different people, Jan, tell me a similar thing. You know, I'd see them in the library or whatever in town. They say, you know, I read your book. He goes, and once I started, I couldn't stop. I read the whole thing in one sitting.
Sure.
I had 7 people tell me that.
Yeah.
Now, that really feels wonderful.
Yep.
You know, one person said, every night before I go to sleep, I sit down, I lay in bed and I read a little bit, and then I fall asleep. He goes, so I have your book. I just started. I picked it up to see what it was about.
Which one was it of all three?
That was the, no, it was the essays.
The essay. Oh, the one we were just talking about. Yeah.
Said, I just picked it up to see what it was about. He goes, I read the whole thing before I fell asleep.
Some people read like that, very fast. I'm a slow reader, but if I get into something, I don't want to put it down.
Well, to back to your original question, the whole thing was just kind of I'm just going to do this, see what happens. And, you know, I was so reinforced by the response. I felt so good to have somebody tell me they read my book, they liked it, and I'm like, I'm going to do some more of that. And all the while, this whole idea of that Sawyer's Regret was kind of percolating. I want to get that story out there before somebody else does.
Yeah,
it's really
definitely. So what does your son think of your work?
He's very encouraging, very encouraging. Would be supportive. That's what I'm looking for.
That's just so important. You know, it really is.
Yeah.
Now we've got this one. This is a thinner book, and it's a quick read as well. Text Mostly. Where'd you get that title from? And when did you decide?
Oh, that just kind of landed one day. But let me tell you what happened with that. I took a course in short stories at Thayer Memorial Library. It was 10 weeks in the summer. And we started with just a little snippet that we write, and we bring it in, and we discuss it. And then as time went on, you made it longer and longer. You were supposed to develop the story. So when it got to the last class, the assignment was to bring a completed short story in 4,000 words. And I was like, I can't come up with a new story I'm not going to go next week. I was that close.
Yeah.
So I had a bright idea. I would take Moving Willie, which hadn't been published yet, and I'll see if I can condense some of the elements and make one little short story out of it. See if I can distill it to that point. So I got it down to about 5,000 words. And then I started chopping it, and I got it to 4,000 words, which is what the assignment was.
Okay, I was wondering if she gave you that, or he gave you that limit.
Yeah, it was Winona Wentz up in Lancaster. So that was the assignment. And so I brought it to class, and she raved about it. She said, this is fantastic. She goes, you should send it out. So I sent it out to some literary magazines, and one of them not only published it, but several months later, they sent me an email saying it was shortlisted for Short Story of the Year.
Yeah.
So I not only felt great about that, but I felt great about where it had come from, the bigger book, the stories that are in the bigger book.
I love this. Is sort of still based on your life at the farm.
Right.
We rode for what seemed hours, following cart paths and trails in the woods, through gates between high grass pastures and old orchards, divided by Charlie's birch rail gates that sagged and stretched across the openings like dirty white smiles. Beautifully. Were you this good with words when you were a kid in school? Did they ever notice this? Or did you not even think about it?
I have to say no. I don't think, I can't remember being in school having the opportunity to express myself in writing more than just like a term paper now and then and stuff like that. Certainly not creative writing. That totally came by accident, the whole thing.
Not even college? Did you go out to college?
Well, in my freshman year and my sophomore year, both English teachers accused me of plagiarism because my term papers were too good.
What did you say back to them?
I had to prove. I explained to the freshman professor how I came up with. It was the three sisters in Macbeth and their role in the book. I explained to her how I came to that and how I crafted it, and by the end of the conversation, she understood that I had really done it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, it's just kind of funny, but getting into just writing was an accident. I think I've told you the story before. I went to a book critique group, and at the end of it, the facilitator said, "Now I'm going to surprise you. We're going to start our own story." And she passed out blank.
Was it like one of those library book groups?
Yes.
She took it that next step. Wow.
Yeah, she said, what makes a good story? So we talked about that. She goes, okay, now we're going to start our own story. She passed out paper. And it was 7:15, and I made the joke, I wanted to run.
Yeah.
And so I figured I'd take a try. And everybody was writing like crazy.
Yeah.
They were making paragraphs, and I was sitting there like a dope. And I was like, well, I got to do something. So I came up with a sentence. That's no good. Cross it out. Another sentence. That's pretty good. Another sentence. Well, that should be the first sentence. Well, that should go. And I was scratching and making lines and scratching things out. I wound up with 3 sentences with lines, and I didn't know if I could read it and keep it together. I knew what it was supposed to be. So they went around the room. Everybody read their stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to get out of this.
No.
So everybody had read, and the facilitator said, would you like to read yours, Ray? So I'm looking at it. I was afraid to take my eyes off it because I'd lose my continuity, and I read it, the 3 sentences, and when I stopped reading, I didn't look up, and it was quiet.
Yeah.
And I looked up at the facilitator, and she's like this. She goes, wow, she goes, that was really good.
And everybody else was silent.
And the lady next to me said, yeah, she goes, come on, write some more. I want to hear what happens.
There you go. That was your first red flag.
That is, and that was really what started this. I wrote a piece about encouragement and how powerful it is in the essay book, and that's really what happened to me. People were saying, wow, you were a really good writer. So I kept writing.
Now that was in college, right?
No, that was just that's 10 years ago when I first started fiddling around with.
How do you find the time to write? You have a job, also another job. Is that full-time?
Yeah, it's full-time.
Yeah.
Well, what I did with Sawyer's Regret, I really wanted to write that book. Have you heard of NaNoWriMo?
No.
National Novel Writers Month. It's every November, and it's an international program, and the whole idea is to encourage people to write. So the idea is write 50,000 words in a month by the end of November, 30 days. Now, you don't have to finish. Most people don't, but the idea is to try.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be good. It just gives you the material.
Yeah.
So I had the bright idea, wow, why don't I do NaNoWriMo? I had heard about it. I'll do NaNoWriMo, and I'll do that book. That'll force me to do it. So that's what I did. So I quickly learned that 50,000 words is very difficult. That's 1,700 a day.
I don't know if I could do that. That's a lot.
And the lady at the library asked me to do a seminar, so that bolstered me.
So that you were leading the seminar?
Yeah, so she asked me to lead that, so I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to do this book. So every morning, I got up literally at 5 a.m. and I had in my head where I was in the story and where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so I'd write till 7, then I'd get ready and I'd go to work. And then when I'd come home, I'd eat dinner or whatever, and I'd sit down again, I'd pick up where I left off.
And you did it on the computer just as it came along.
And so the whole idea, Jan, is you don't worry about character names, dates. You go back and put that all in. You just go with the story, and I just let the story come out.
Yeah. Now, are you the type of person that when you're creating a story, do you constantly go back and change it, or do you just let it flow and then worry about it later?
Well, you'll worry about it later. That's the whole idea.
I like
of this.
that. Yeah, that's what I would do. But I'll worry about it later. I'll edit it. I can edit other people's, but I'm like, no, just keep going.
That's right. That's the whole idea.
Ray, how again can they reach you and get your books?
Well, Amazon is where the books are, or if they want to go to my website, it's www.eraymondtatten.com. And if they buy a book there, I'll autograph it and mail it out to them.
Now, do you have any over at Barnes & Noble or at Tatten?
I don't.
Okay, Tatten especially. They're great. They
In
love
Westboro.
authors. They love authors. Did you ever appear there?
I appeared there with, what did I do there? I did the essay book. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I did the first book there.
Yeah, they do an excellent job. I send a lot of my authors over there.
Yeah.
So we've been talking with E. Raymond Tatten, and his books are Moving Willie, Sawyer's Regret, Text Mostly. And before we close, is there another one coming up?
It's going to have to be. It's just driving along, I'm always thinking about percolating them. That would be a good book. That would be a good book. So I'm sure I'll do
Do you keep a piece of
another
paper beside you in the car, and when you stop, write down an idea?
No. I really, after Sawyer's Regret, I was like, I got to take a break. That was like, that was such a adventure. I just thought I'd take a break, but I'm going to do some more. It's been fun.
Where did the picture of the beautiful, the lake, where was that?
So, I'm not sure. That's something I had taken, the lake, but I had an idea where I wanted to paint a scene, have a scene painted, but I was on eBay looking for something, and a fellow was selling that hatchet. He had a picture of the hatchet. He had it for sale, and I'm like, that is exactly the kind of hatchet
definitely
that could have been in my story. So,
but the lake looks like Sutton to me.
That could be any number of lakes around here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a perfect background.
Yeah, it came out great. I thought it was good.
Yeah, well, we'll be talking with you, Raymond Tatten, and I suspect that for the next year or so, or two, there's going to be another one coming up. Because if you've got the writing bug and you are good at it, it's like trying to stop a craving for chocolate, isn't it? Like, I can relate to that. Can't happen. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun. I was looking forward to it. I'm glad we could get together.
It's good. We'll see you next time. I'll be my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.